I'm Councillor John Ward, Leader of Babergh District Council, and I'll be chairing this meeting. May I remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. Please do not interrupt other speakers or hold separate conversations whilst others are speaking. If you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure your mobile phones are on silent or switched off. And finally, we'll be using e-voting for this meeting on the modern.gov app, so please could members make sure they are logged in and ready to use the app. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you'll be deemed by the Council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. I'd now like to move to the agenda, please. So item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have received apologies from Councillor Gould and Councillor McCraw.
Thank you. Item 2, to receive declarations of pecuniary, other registrable or non-registrable interest by members. Are there any to declare? Nope. Thank you. Item 3, paper BCA 2243, to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of February 2023. So I'll go through the minutes. If there are any points of accuracy, please let me know. So page 5, anyone? I have one typo mistake on page 5, and that is right at the bottom on the penultimate line. It should say confirmed rather than conformed. Page 6, anyone? Again, I have one typo on page 6. Again, the penultimate line, it should say assets, not assists. Page 7. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. Page 11. And finally, page 12. So if there are no further comments about the minutes, may I have a proposer, please? Councillor Arthur, thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Busby, thank you. So we'll now conduct the vote.
Thank you, Chair. The vote is now in progress. That is 6 votes for, that's unanimous.
Thank you. Item 5, to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received.
Item 5, questions by councillors.
No. None received.
And item 6, matters referred by the Overview and Scrutiny or Joint Audit and Standards Committees.
There are no matters referred from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee or the Joint Audit and Standards Committee.
Thank you. Item 7, forthcoming decisions list. Members of the Cabinet, are there any comments on the forthcoming decisions list? Nope. Okay then. Moving on, item 8, paper BCA 2244, the General Fund Financial Monitoring for 2022 to 23, quarter 3. I'd like to invite the Cabinet Member for Finance, Assets and Investments to introduce the report. Councillor Busby.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to go through this in great detail. In fact, I'm not going to go through it in any detail. I think we've all had a good look at this. It's a very thorough paper. All I'll do is, if you could turn to page 21, which shows the current forecast variances. I think it's useful just to look at how those variances have changed since quarter 2. There's not been a significant amount of change. On corporate resources, there's a difference of about 80,000 where we've reduced the forecast for interim staff costs. Customer operations, again, about £50,000 underspend for staff vacancies. These are the differences between the two quarters. On housing, there's a £135,000 increase in income from grants and rents in the forecast. Postage costs and spend for the May elections are about 80,000 worse. So the net service expenditure is showing £185,000 better position than we were looking at in Q2. Apart from that, there's not been a great deal. The interest payable, there's 90,000 increase in the borrowing rates, and that's just about it really. So if anybody's got any questions, other than that, I'd like to propose that we note this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Busby. May I have a seconder for this? Councillor Malvisi. Questions. Do any members of the Cabinet have any questions for Councillor Busby on this report? Councillor Hinton, do you have any questions? No. Well, we'll move over into debate then. Would anyone like to open up the debate on this? Any comments from anyone? We're all happy with it? Councillor Arthey?
It's actually a question, and I'm just trying to find it in the paperwork, which I haven't yet, but it's to do with, I think it's the gas charge for the leisure centres, which I'm guessing is Kingfisher Leisure Pool. And there's a bit in here about how it was in budget and then it's recharged and then it features again and then is recharged or something. I just wondered if, when I looked at the figures, I thought they're not actually the same figures. So I just wondered if somebody could explain how that works.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll pass that straight to either Melissa or Rebecca.
I'll look for the page as well.
I think
Thanks,
you're
Melissa.
referring to, I'm trying to read the page number, 22, I think, where we've got the leisure contracts at the bottom. So what happens is we actually pay for the gas and then we recharge, or everyone, Abbey Croft then pay us for the gas charges. So you can see there's operating costs and then there's the income as well. There's a 16k underspend, but that's due to rates relief. So that's kind of separate to the gas comment. But it's expenditure and then a recharge coming in from Abbey Croft.
Melissa is absolutely right. That is where I saw it. So the other bit that I don't quite understand is that if there's a recharge in there, how does that work when I presume the contract is actually with Abbey Croft direct? That's what it appears to say.
Hello, thanks for that question. So, looking at it in a bit more detail from some of our working papers, what has happened was when the original budget was set, it was set with the gas cost and a recharge, but in actuality, Abbey Croft pays for the gas directly. So, so we're not actually incurring that gas expenditure, which is why there's a 59,000 underspend on the operating costs, because we've not actually incurred that expenditure, but then likewise we're not getting the recharge in either, which is why there's then it's showing as an overspend on the income line. So overall there's nil impact on the budget, but they're just because the way we were showing it in the budget, it's showing as two separate lines.
Okay, can I ask if that's going to be the same in the future, or will it not feature at all? Because it seems to me that if we're actually featuring something that we then don't pay, there's very little point.
far be it for me to intervene, but this is quite a unique situation that arose as part of the solar carports funding that we got from government. So the original proposal was that we were going to, in fact, government were requiring us to pay the energy bills. So the person that made the bid had to be the person paying the energy bills. As it transpired, we managed to negotiate that out. So I think there was a sort of tweak through the process of the budget times, because it is Abergh that now pay them. But that's why there's a slight anomaly in terms of that, which is, Rebecca's just explained it. I don't think it happens very often. That's just because the bid we put into government for solar carports.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have anything they wish to say? Okay, I think there's just one comment I'd like to make. Obviously, the 667, we understand that the reason for that overspend and the impact that's had on the position so far. But I think it shows how prudent we were in putting that £500,000 in the inflationary pressures reserve, because it has meant that we've got that money and it's there to do what it was intended to do, which was to mitigate the pressures that inflation we knew was going to cause on the budget for this year, and which has largely contributed to that 667. So I think that's the good news that comes out of this, and we are able to cope with that forecast adverse variance. So if there are no further comments, then I think we can move straight to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you. That is 6 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Item 9, paper BCA 2245, the HRA financial monitoring for 2022 to 23, quarter 3. I'd like to invite the Cabinet Member for Finance, Assets and Investments to introduce this report. Councillor Busby.
Okay, again, the same deal here. Unfortunately, there has been quite a significant increase in the deficit that we're forecasting, of about £900,000, which is down to the increased costs of building services and repairs and maintenance, unfortunately. So we're now looking at a deficit in the region of 1.7 million, I think. If anybody's got any questions on this, again, happy to take them.
Thank you, Councillor Busby. So that's proposed by you. May I have a seconder, please? Councillor McLaren. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Chair. It's not really, well, it is related to finance, but it's on the report 11.2. We've got, since 2020, Babergh has installed 85 air source heat pumps in council-owned homes. And I was wondering whether we had done some evaluation on the effectiveness and the efficiency of these in terms of money or benefit to residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McLaren. Councillor Osborne, do you want to pick that up, or should I ask the Director for Housing?
Sorry, I didn't quite, because Mary had her head turned that way. I couldn't quite hear the question.
Councillor McLaren wants to know if we've got any data on the effectiveness of the heat pumps and any of the financial benefits of having those, I guess, as opposed to gas heating.
I will have to go to the Director of Housing to answer that one. Thank you.
Okay. Deborah, are you able to provide any insight, please?
It's actually work in progress at the moment, so we haven't got any data at the moment, but we're going to we are working on it.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you. Councillor Osborne.
Sorry.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I can just add to that as well, bearing in mind that this is the quarter 3 reporting, so we've moved on quite a bit since then. So that's when that work will start, when we get towards the beginning of this new year, when the work will start commencing on the effectiveness of it. But bearing in mind all the other work that we're doing as well for building services, it has to take a back seat for the moment, but it will be being looked at and monitored.
Thank you. Can I just add to
Yes.
that? It was just that it was raised with my group of residents. Thank you.
Councillor Busby, did you want to say?
Well, I seem to recall, my understanding is that we actually had some problems with the heat pumps that we put in, that they weren't, they were working, but they weren't as good as we expected them to be in terms of noise, I think, and things like that. So I guess we're probably still evaluating that. I think it's the kind of thing that you put on a new house. I'm not convinced it's necessarily a good thing for a refit, but I may be wrong.
Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think some of the issues are our residents trying to adapt and get used to that new form of heating. But I think it's fair to say we need to wait until the evaluation is in place for us to be able to establish whether they are as effective as we're hoping that they are.
Thank you. Any other questions from anyone? I'll move over and ask Councillor Hinton, do you have any questions on the HRA?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick one, really, based on those the comments that just come out about heat pumps. There was something in the paper today about heat pumps have to be installed within, can't be installed within 3 metres of boundary walls and so forth, and so it implied that the heat pumps are going to have to be installed in the bottom of people's gardens. Has this sort of been factored into our progress as far as replacing existing energy systems with heat pumps?
Mr. Chairman, if we can go to the Director of Housing. I'm not sure. I don't always believe what I read in newspapers, I have to say. But I will go to the Director of Housing to answer that one. Thank you.
It's a quality paper.
Deborah, are you able to?
I'm not able to shed any light on that comment, which was in the paper at the weekend. But I will speak to colleagues and see what we can find out.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, it's probably something that will have to come out via building regs or something like that in the dim and distant future. A bit like reinforcing roofs of sheds for solar panels.
Yeah. Okay.
I think this is right. That we're actually approaching it in the right way, which is to have done a few and evaluate them, rather than just rushing in and trying to do hundreds. Yeah.
Okay. Tom, did you have something you wanted to?
Yes, just on the point of heat pumps, I believe what the article was referring to was that heat pumps wouldn't be allowed as permitted development. They would require planning permission if they were within certain parameters of adjacent buildings or anything like that, so that things could be considered properly, noise assessments and those kind of things. So it wasn't a categoric, they cannot be within X distance of the boundary, but that they would require permission in order to be so. So it adds a layer of complication rather than necessarily saying that it can't happen. If that helps.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you. Okay. Members of the Cabinet, are there any comments you wish to make in the debate on this paper? Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It feels a bit surreal, actually, looking at this. When it was only last week we approved, actually, the HRA budget, so it seems a little bit strange thinking backwards instead of forwards. No, I think it's a pretty comprehensive report. It says it all. I'd just like to point members, especially our member for the environment, sitting right next to me, on the environmental implications and the work that's being done alongside to put that into place. And 11.6, surveyors have been studying for the retrofit coordinators diploma. I think that's excellent news as well, as long as all the other stuff that goes with it. So obviously housing team are playing their part in us delivering our target of net zero by 2030. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. Okay, any further comments? We're in debate, yes. Yeah. Councillor Malvisi.
Yeah, it's it's encouraging to see that we have moved along the green agenda with the air source heat pumps and replacing oil-fired storage, communal heating with individual heat pumps, etc. And it's good news to see that people are being trained in retrofit, because that's going to be more demanding as the council moves forward. So yes, but like all these new things, we're going to have to wait at least a year before we get any data. And then it's going to take a couple of years before we get any meaningful data, so that we actually have comparisons. But we're on the right track. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Levy. Anyone else? In which case, we'll move to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. That is 6 votes for. That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Item 10, paper BCA 2246, the Q3 performance monitoring. This item is for noting. In Councillor McCraw's absence, I will introduce the report for Cabinet today. So we have the Q3 performance report. This current briefing provides a selection of the performance highlights for each of our 6 strategic priorities, and intended to give Cabinet members an opportunity to consider our achievements for Q3 2022 to 23. The areas where performance is worth highlighting: complaints, that the numbers are down, web visits, but that there's change in numbers there, although there are encouraging signs on social media turnaround. I'd like to get members to note the average number of days for standard void relets. In terms of data quality, we're addressing errors in previous Cabinet reports. And also at the end of Q3, in terms of our key performance indicators, we only have usable KPIs for 21 out of our 66 outcomes. So there's more work being done on that, and we plan to reach minimum 80% coverage for which is effectively coverage for 53 outcomes by the end of Q4. It would be useful if individuals can pick up highlights in their own areas. I'll just kick off with the economy performance indicators. Some of the key points to note: 160 attendees at the Business Innovation Awards, where 22 businesses were nominated across 8 categories, with Q Technology being announced the overall winner. 70 stakeholders attended 4 workshop sessions to help shape our new culture, heritage and visitor economy strategy, and more on that later when we come to debate that item. The solar carport project was good. That is now in the process of delivering nearly 180,000 kilowatt hours per annum, and saving 62 tonnes of carbon per annum at our leisure centres. And that was completed under budget, which was excellent news. In terms of other things, the virtual high street has now exceeded 400 businesses, so that's going strong. We've now got a marketing database of nearly 4,000 contacts following the Visit Suffolk campaign, which is very useful. Digital skills for business programme completed with around 26 businesses taking part in training and mentoring. And we've got the Schools Enterprise Challenge, and 2 schools in Babergh are involved in that, one in Sudbury and one in East Bergholt. So in terms of other things, Councillor Gould has sent me a note, and she's particularly encouraged by the monitoring to assess the efficiency of both the water filtration and solar carports at the Kingfisher, which we're going to be putting in place, and that the tree planting strategy is now underway, and so that's going to be good news for our biodiversity aims in the future. Can I ask anyone else if they wish to? Councillor McLaren, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Chair. Well, as you can see from the Communities and Wellbeing Directorate, they're very busy 3 months, but I'm not going to repeat the detail. There's enough detail in there for everybody to read. But there are just some elements that I think need special mention. I want to mention the locality teams, which are divided into green, blue and yellow across both districts. They have not yet been operating a full year, but the evidence of their work is impressive. As each team has developed under the direction of 3 new assistant managers over the past few months, this report is evidence of their hard work together as a new grouping. Not in the report, but which needs recognition, is the hosting of the parish liaison meeting in East Babergh, which was a success. The team provided all the practical support needed for that event and were able to display the wide variety of services they offer, which was important to all the parish councils present. The Communities and Wellbeing Directorate have very little money in their directorate budget to provide for grants. I'm amazed how small it is. So, working with multiple agencies and funding organisations requires knowledge, skills, hard work and good working relationships to enable and empower our communities and groups to access the financial support they require. I'd like to just mention community safety, which of course is an alliance of many agencies. Due to the closer working and shared information, the management of antisocial behaviour is actually producing results. This week I'm going to join the multidisciplinary teams in Great Cornard to engage with the local residents there, listening to their views and consider their solutions to the problems of antisocial behaviour. Much of the wellbeing work is undertaken with Abbeycroft Leisure in Sudbury and Hadley, and the activities, as you can see from the report, range from holiday activity for children and families to enabling and empowering people suffering from mental health, dementia and loneliness to do positive things within their communities and families. Finally, the cost of living and warm spaces. I've been able to visit many warm spaces across the district. The grants team have paid out 30 grants to support the provision of the warm space in church halls and village halls. However, there are many groups and clubs outside of those 30 that are providing this facility without recourse to funding. Such is the generous spirit of our communities. However, those groups who applied for a grant and were not successful with the warm space working have had their grants stopped. Officers presently are doing informal visits to identify warm spaces to see how they're operating and what they're offering residents. In conclusion, I would like to take this opportunity to thank everybody in the Communities and Wellbeing Directorate, as they have done a fantastic job over the past 3 months. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McLaren. Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, as always, the challenges are, don't go away, and it's been really busy for the housing team. But just as an indication of how hard they have been working, a total of 53 households were prevented or relieved from homelessness. 30% of these were rehoused into the private sector, compared to 19% in Q3 the previous year. 41 households were provided with emergency B&B or temporary accommodation, and 11 of these households included children. Not a good place to be. 10 homeless duties were discharged via the central Suffolk lettings. This is almost double what was achieved in Q3 last year. Rough sleeping, there were 20 referrals were received by the rough sleeping team. 8 households at risk of rough sleeping were provided with temporary accommodation. And this figure was 0 in Q3, so that the previous year. So this shows how that workload is increasing, unfortunately. The tenancy support officers secured just under 20,400 for those referred for financial support. This included new benefit awards, discretionary housing payments and funding from charitable applications. The housing team have introduced a new voids and workflow module for our open housing system. This means all data and voids progress can now be viewed within the system rather than a spreadsheet, making it easy to know the status of any void property. And I must admit, I'm finding it a lot easier now to monitor and keep a check on it. We've developed new performance data dashboards so that we can track all voids and performance. Following approval from cabinets in November, we have launched our tenant engagement strategy, and tenants received a My Home bulletin in December to alert them that the strategy has been approved, and there has been a positive response with some tenants already coming forward to become more involved and work with us, which is great news. Work continues on our building services transformation and improvements programme. And I know we're reporting on Q3, but Mr. Chairman, if I could just be a little bit cheeky, and I felt it appropriate to provide details of a new initiative, and it's Houses for Homes. This is the Empty Homes initiative operated by the Environmental Health Private Sector Housing Team of Babergh and Mid-Suffolk District Councils, set up with the aim of reducing the number of long-term empty homes in the districts. And we all know the big part that private landlords play in providing homes for our people to live in. So well done to Justin and his team developing this initiative, and well done to the housing team for all their hard work that they continue to do through the year. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Movisi.
Chairman, on the environment headline, performance indicators, fly tipping has dropped to pre-pandemic levels with a report of 76 incidents, which is, it's coming down. Waste subscribers for the brown bin has increased overall at 2.44, but what I find disconcerting is that our recycling waste collected continues to hover around the 13.4, 13.2%. Yes, it's a drop from the 16.1 in 2021 and 2022 at 16.2, but it needs to be further reduced, and that will only be through education, I believe, and just repeating to all households what can and cannot be recycled. Last week I was at Chiltern Depot and I met members of the Public Realm team whose mowing regimes have changed in order to encourage wildflower growth, but they're all running around with little tablets and they can immediately enter the data that they need. So that automatically gets fed into the system, and we're beginning to gather some good monitoring, good scheduling, and good data. On health and safety and sustainable environment, we've now got 3 solar compactor smart bins in Sudbury, and they're fully operational. And these do exactly what it says on the tin. Most food businesses in Babergh or 88% of the food businesses in Babergh have a food hygiene rating of 5. The team are working very, very hard to get that up to a much higher figure. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to, in Councillor McCraw's absence, just go through some of the key points from the customers' information. Firstly, in Q3 there are an average of 375 calls per day, and that's a reduction of 32% in calls from the previous quarter. The average abandonment of calls was 18%, which was a decrease from 28% in Q2. And the average wait time, 3 minutes 44 seconds, and that's a decrease from 5 minutes and 41 seconds in Q2. There were also a total of 520 visits to the customer access points in Hadley, Shotley and Sudbury over that Q3 period. So, and that's an increase slightly by 3%, but although with 1,711 visits in the year to date, this does represent only 50% of the pre-COVID visits over the same period in 2019 to 2020. So access point visits are significantly down. Now that may be for the fact that people are using other means to access our services. There were 2,026 chatbots and 912 automated telephone sessions, although that does represent a decline on the previous quarter. Chatbot activity decreased by 34%, and automated telephone sessions were down by 48%. Complaints are creeping up a bit. There are 193 complaints in quarter 3, only one fewer than quarter 2. However, year on year it represents increases of 13.4% and a further 8.5%. That was for 2021 to 22, and a further 8.5% increase from 2022 to 23. Most complaints, that is 37% of them, relate to building services. Asset compliance next on the list at 26%, asset management 13%, with the next most complained about services. 97.7% of non-major planning decisions were decided on time, and ranks the district 23rd out of all local authorities in England, which is a pretty good performance. Just a bit of information about our online presence. 53,000 Twitter impressions, and in the past quarter, and it's the first quarter that those impressions have increased since quarter 1 of 2020 to 21, when they were at their highest of 212,000. And there are 126,647 Facebook reaches, and this is the second quarter that our reach has increased since data was first reported in quarter 1 of 2020 to 21, although it has fallen from a high of 398,000 in quarter 4 2020 to 21, which is at the peak of the Omicron variant of COVID, and then it decreased down to just over 61,000 in the first quarter of this year. So there is a variable activity online, but it is quite substantial. So that really, I think, concludes the various reports. Does anyone have any questions about this? Okay, Councillor Hinton, do you have anything you wish to ask? So members of the Cabinet, will move into debate. Does anyone have anything to debate? Councillor Arthey.
Just a couple of comments, really. The first one is about customers and the wait times and abandonment rate, which I've been quite a critic of in the past. So I think we should recognise and welcome the fact that both of those figures are coming down. Councillor Malvisi highlighted the 13.5% of recyclables that we collect that are then rejected. And I think that's quite an important figure, and we've still got more work to do on this, because it's unfortunate that we're going around collecting blue bin contents, we're taking them to the MRF, and they're being rejected. So we've got a bit more work to do there. And then finally, just a comment on the communities section. And I noticed that there's a lot on community grants. There are a couple of brief mentions of SIL, but it is the Community Infrastructure Levy, and the next report that we're dealing with is the SIL bids. I just wondered if in the future we ought to have a little bit more on SIL in the community section. We have got a couple of mentions about the review, but I wonder if we ought to have a little bit more about what SIL's actually providing in terms of delivered projects in our communities.
I think that's a very good point, because it is quite an important aspect of our funding of community projects, both obviously in terms of the money that neighbourhoods get through the neighbourhood component, but also the central funds that we hold and increasingly allocating to projects. I think that makes sense if we can do that. I'm sure we can.
I'm seeing lots of nods.
Yes, yeah. Yes, am I.
From that direction, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments from anyone? Councillor Busby.
Yeah, I'm concerned that we're entering into project overload. And we had an economy presentation last week, which was excellent. And it was, if you look at the report here, you can see that there's a lot of things a lot of projects that are going on. And I'm just concerned what kind of evaluation we undertake on new projects as to what the benefits are likely to be, if there's any, can you put a financial figure on that, and the costs to deliver. There's a temptation to say we've got all this work, therefore we need to increase staff numbers. And we can't afford to keep increasing staff numbers. We don't have the funds for that. Some of these projects I think we need to evaluate closer and maybe decide that we don't do some. We need to set some kind of priorities. I don't know whether Fiona would like to comment on that first.
Well, I'll comment, and I think the Chief Executive probably wants to comment as well. But my view is I think that we do assess projects before proceeding with them in terms of their suitability, viability and necessity. I certainly see that within the economic development team that the work that's done there, the projects that they undertake, are those that are going to bring real benefit to our district, to businesses in our communities. So I think that there is a rigorous assessment that is carried out. Yes, there are a lot, but that just goes to show that there's a lot of work that needs to be done and that can and should be done by us. But I'll pass over to the Chief Executive for further comment.
Thank you, Leader. I think, Councillor Busby, you were concerned that we might be entering into project overload.
We are.
We are in project overload, exactly what I was going to say. So, yes, we are already in that position, and I'm confident saying that because that's what our peer review said in the middle of last year, confirming that we are punching above our weight, we're doing fantastic things, but we can't just keep doing that and doing that more and more and more. Not just for financial reasons, and sometimes we're the wrong people to necessarily lead a project, and sometimes we're absolutely the right people. As the leaders alluded to, we already have fairly robust systems in place in terms of, is this project going to add value? But we have tightened that recently. So we've introduced what was known as a Good Start Board that is specifically to do that, to evaluate in more detail, how is this project going to have an impact? What is the impact we're expecting to see? And is it the best value? I.e., if you were to put this project up against 3 or 4 others, is this the one you would pick necessarily? So we are implementing that as we speak, but we will need to keep that under constant review, and particularly given your portfolio, it does link back inevitably to how much resource do we have at the end of the day to be able to invest in what variety of things.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, because again, the concern is that by tackling too many things, there's a danger that we don't do the important things quickly enough and well enough because the resource is spread thinly. I think we have got some very key projects on the go at the moment, and I'd hate to see them slide because we're involved in too many other things.
Thank you, Councillor Busby. Valid points, and I think certainly as Chief Executive said, we're tightening up on the assessment and effectively the monitoring of projects, indeed the way we go about deciding the prioritisation and which ones to proceed with. So we need to keep an eye on it, but thank you for bringing it to our attention.
We can't solve the world's problems,
no,
much as though we'd like to try.
We're just trying to solve Babergh's problems.
I've got another point. The waste sites, you mentioned that the usage had dropped since pre-COVID. And I wondered whether that was because we now operate an appointments process, and whether if we reverted back to just driving in, it might increase the amount that they use.
I mentioned the access points.
Oh, sorry, it was access points.
Yeah.
I was talking about the household waste.
No, that's county responsibility, not ours. So I was talking about the Sudbury and Hadley and Shotley customer access points. Yeah, no problem. Councillor McLaren.
Can I just go back to the, thank you, Chair. Can I just go back to the projects? I would find it very helpful to see a list of the current projects. Perhaps I'm not clever enough to know which all of them that are going on, but it would be very helpful to me to see the number of what they are.
Yeah.
Because that, if
I'm
we're
sure
going
we'll
to
be
make
able to pull
decisions
something
around
together
this,
for
then we
cabinet
need to know.
members. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Busby.
Sorry to come back in again. I'm not too convinced about Sil coming in. I think you get plenty of opportunity to shout how good you are, you guys, and we appreciate that you are doing a good job. If you put too much into here, it dilutes the other stuff, I think. You could put it into the communities as part of the grant scheme, but I'm wary about extending this report any longer than it is. One concern I do have on the environment is that we talk about the tree work that we did in terms of the canopy survey and the tree planting strategy that we've got. I mean, I've written to Tom, so he's not going to be surprised at what I'm about to say, which I think we forget and don't give enough importance to the historic trees that we've already got. We've lost a couple in Bentley recently because we were either too slow or didn't consider them important enough to put TPOs on. Bentley have raised a concern that they're likely to lose more. But we seem slow in defending what we've currently got rather than, again, putting the effort into new things. Well, new trees are great, and I haven't got a thing to say against that. I think we should be doing that. But I think we just need to put some more emphasis on the stuff that we've already got.
Okay, thanks for that. That's a valid point. Yeah, if there are significant old trees which are at risk and don't have TPOs, then we do need to act promptly to, if that's the appropriate way of going in order to preserve them.
Well, for instance, we have a project or an planning application that's likely to come forward in Bentley, which is called Brockley Wood, which is for mining and also waste processing. So the project is expanded, as a result of which I think 24 key trees are likely to be lost. Well, if they've got a TPO on them because they are important, and they are important because they're part of really historic woods, then that might give us an extra strength in determining whether the planning should go ahead or not. If they haven't got TPOs on, the applicant's likely to say, well, it can't be that important because they haven't got a TPO. I think we just need to be wary of losing. Once you've lost a 200-year-old oak, John, then you've lost it. And it doesn't matter how many saplings we plant, they're not going to make up for it, really. And I understand that, I think, have we got more historic trees as a district than any other or something? Or certainly in this area, I think. So we need to protect them.
Yeah, okay. Fair point, and we probably we'll look into that. Councillor Malvisi.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Busby is making a valid point. And one of the things that had to start in order to achieve the green canopy was we needed to know what trees we had and where they had them. Because unfortunately, this knowledge or information was sort of held by town and parish councils. Some did know and some didn't know. Well, now we've mapped the area, we've recorded the data, and it's on GIS software, and it will assist with the monitoring and maintaining of those sites. But because we know what we've got and where it is, we can now go to the next phase, which is educating the parish councils and town councils to get their trees TPO'd. Move forward. You know, we need to engage and talk. We need to educate. So we are moving on to the next step. And I do have to say that Babergh has been put forward for an award on the work it's done on the green canopy. and that's taking place on Wednesday.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Councillor Marvisi. Councillor Busby.
Yeah, it would be remiss of me if I didn't come back and say, I think it's harsh to blame the parish councils for not getting the trees TPO'd. Bentley has tried for months to try and get some, and they've done everything they possibly can, apart from living them, to get some trees TPO'd. I don't think it's down to the parishes, I'm sorry, I think it's internal resourcing. We probably haven't got enough resource in that area, and there's probably too many items for the resource that we've got to deal with. So I think it's an internal issue.
Councillor Malvisi.
Now that Public Realm is better equipped and the team have got their tablets and things, so they know where the trees are. So the data internally is more quickly accessed, and therefore they'll be able to respond more quickly. We're getting there. It may not be quite as fast as some of us would like, but we are getting there.
Thank you. Right. I think it's probably time we drew this to a close. A bit of a digression onto trees, but nonetheless interesting and useful. So that's it. The Q3 performance report is noted. There's no vote on this. Moving on, item 11, paper BCA 2247, Community Infrastructure Levy, the SIL Expenditure Programme for March 2023. I'd like to invite the Cabinet Member for Planning to introduce this report. Councillor Arthey.
Thank you, Chairman. You are now all familiar with the format, and I hope that you're also familiar with the fact that Cabinet has the responsibility to determine bids twice yearly. So I won't go into detail on the bids, but refer you, of course, to Appendix B, which has the full technical assessments. And if you have any detailed questions, Christine Thurlow from the SIL team is here, and I'm sure she can answer them. There are 5 bids for you to consider today, affecting the parishes of Stutton, Capel St Mary, Monks Ely, Sudbury and Edwardstone. So just to briefly run through those, B2211 is Stutton, which is a new activity room. They're looking for £100,000. You'll remember that that is now our new maximum for community projects, and that represents 74% of the total eligible project costs. And this is to provide the village hall with a new activity room and the provision of a new toilet that's also designed to disabled access standards, and that is recommended to you for approval. The second one is B2203 in Capel St Mary, where they're looking to provide play area improvements at the existing playing field. Again, the SIL bid is for £100,000, and this time represents 53% of the total project costs. It's for an update of the existing facility, which is outdated and not fit for purpose for a community, as you know, that have seen significant housing growth. There's evidence of wide community support to provide additional leisure and community facilities, and of course it encourages active outdoor play for children. I know that you like to know where money comes from for these schemes, and this one includes quite a lot of collaborative spend with our SIL funding and Capel Community Trust putting money into it, and the Parish Council, along with some unspent Section 106 developer contributions as well. Again, that's recommended for your approval. Third one is B2210 in Monks Ely, again play area. The SIL bid here is £51,068, and this time represents 65% of the total project costs. We put these percentages in because you'll remember that we've got not only the newly uplifted £100,000 limit, but we've also got a 75% maximum contribution from SIL. So again, this is providing additional play equipment at the existing playground area. The village has seen some growth in recent years. You'll remember that some of the seal payments are still outstanding in Monks Ely, but they have got a development of 17 new houses, which is on the old primary school site. So we expect additional families to be moving into the village who can benefit from the new facilities. So again, that's recommended for your approval, and it has wide local support as well. Moving on to B2216 in Sudbury, and this is for a new artificial pitch for Sudbury United Football Club. It's a seal bid of £100,000, which is 10% of the total project costs. The project is a part of a series of proposals to improve the site. So they'll have also additional facilities for disabled car parking spaces and a new unit for use by the club for catering purposes. I'm sure you're more familiar with AFC Sudbury and where it's sited. They've been working in partnership with other groups and organisations, and I'll just mention who they are. It's The Bridge, who work with disadvantaged adults, including picking up issues such as dementia, learning disabilities and mental health issues. They work with local schools and the Active Suffolk Partnership, and they also have inclusive programmes designed for women and girls to promote recreational provision in these groups. The construction of a new pitch will enable them to increase their provision and benefit both local and wider communities. They also do a lot of work with all age groups, so the new pitch will have no restriction on who can use the facility, so it will benefit ages 3 upwards, basically, with no restriction. But I'm guessing that some of us are probably past playing football, not only because of the risks that it can present, but because there comes an age when we probably don't play any longer. So it has the full support of the Football Association, the FA, and they've sent in a letter of support. The only rider on this one is that you will note that it is subject to planning permission. So that planning permission has not been granted yet. That's still outstanding, so you'll see that the bid is recommended to you today, subject to the grant of planning permission. Finally, moving to Edwardstone, and we're back to another bid for play equipment. It's a seal bid of £11,445, so it's just above the £10,000 that requires Cabinet approval. It's 75% of the total eligible costs, and it's for the provision of new play equipment, including, and punctuation is really important here, including a 4-tower multi-unit, seesaw and resurfacing of the ground. The reason punctuation is important is because it may have sounded like a 4-tower seesaw, but it's not. A 4-tower multi-unit, a seesaw, and resurfacing of the ground so that it can be used all year round. So, if I can propose, please, Chairman, the recommendations at paragraph 3.1 to approve these bids, and also at 3.2 to note and endorse the SIL Expenditure Programme at Appendix A, which is page 97 of your report, and that also, of course, as is usual, includes the full history of projects, SIL bids, and your previous approvals. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Arthur. May I have a seconder, please? Councillor Osborne. Any questions from members of the Cabinet? No. Councillor Hinton, do you have any questions? Councillor Adrian Osborne, you have a question.
Well, it's just perhaps something that Councillor Arthur has forgotten. Us older members of any football club can do walking football now. Thank you.
Yes, Yes, that sounds like a more realistic activity. Okay, so...
And can I say, Chairman, it sounds so entertaining that I might even go and watch Councillor Osborne do it.
Okay. Right, moving into debate. Does anyone wish to say anything about... Councillor Busby.
Yeah, if you look at all the bids, the SIL takes up a portion of it, but the funds come from other places as well. It just concerns me that Monks Ely have actually put nothing towards this, their play area improvements. SIL counts at 51,000, Section 106 is 27,000, and that covers the total cost of the project, which is fine, but it doesn't kind of suggest that they're putting much effort into it themselves.
Councillor Arthur, would you like to respond?
Can I say, Chairman, I think perhaps they might have put in some of their own neighbourhood SIL had they been in receipt of a little bit more. I did mention that the SIL collection in Monks Ely for the 17 new homes has had a little bit of a problem, and Debbie Osak, our debt recovery officer, is chasing that payment. There has been an offer as well of perhaps changing the houses to, I think I can say all of this in public session, can't I? There's also been an offer from the developer to actually change the houses to social housing, and that hasn't come to fruition yet. So I think it's a little bit difficult for Monks Ely to contribute because they haven't got the money at the moment.
If there are other sources apart from SIL to provide funds?
Maybe. I said earlier on that we've got Christine here to help us with detailed questions. That sounds like a detailed question. Christine, can you help with that?
In terms of, I mean, you've answered the question or discussed the situation regarding neighbourhood SIL. I mean, in this particular case, there was Section 106 that was unspent, and it was important to get it spent. And this was a project that the parish wanted to take forward while they wait to develop any other projects that may come forwards should any neighbourhood SIL be forthcoming. So we assisted with bringing this project forward so they could do something for the benefit of their parish.
Thank you, Christine. Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's great that these bids are coming forward and that Babergh can accommodate them. I think, you know, all these improvements that we see, and how many have we done ever since SIL came into being. So I think it's great. In regards to the Sudbury one, absolutely 100% support it. And in regards to the bridge project, they do a fantastic job. I've witnessed it firsthand, and it's fantastic what they do. So I shall be supporting this together with all the other bids that are in place. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Chair. Well, as I sit on the SIL review group, when we put the amounts up to 100,000, there was a bit of debate. But what is interesting is to see that we've got 3 bids here that we actually use in that amount. It's really good. And I'm fully supporting the Stutton development because it will enhance the community hall no end to the benefit of many, many groups and residents that use it. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I agree. These are 5 very good and very worthy projects for SIL funding. The one at Sudbury AFC is particularly exciting, I think, because it's a club that's going from strength to strength, and to have a new artificial pitch and to have further development of that site is only for the good of Sudbury, and particularly in terms of the growing population in Sudbury in that area. To have a good, thriving football club like this is excellent. And particularly the season before last, they did get to the first round of the FA Cup, albeit getting knocked out by Colchester, but it is a club that has ambitions, which is excellent. Councillor Busby.
Yes, a surprise really, because we don't really support Sudbury, do we, according to the certain members from Sudbury and their surroundings. Here's another big project that we're fully behind, but...
Yes, the reality is somewhat different from the perception, I think, in terms of that, but it's going to take a while to change people's perceptions. Okay, Councillor Arthey.
Just before we finish, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Christine and her team. Joey's here today as well. In the autumn, as you probably know, it's part of the work that we're committed to do with SIL. We had a briefing session for parish councils and for district councillors to attend as well. It was really, really well attended and got some fantastic feedback from it. So to also credit the team with that as well, because I think there are a lot of parish councils and perhaps some members who are still not fully up to speed with the SIL process, what they can do with neighbourhood SIL, what they can bid for from us. And that was a really successful, really well presented briefing that was done. So just to express my thanks to the team for everything they do.
Yes, I think we would all like to reiterate that. So thank you, Christine. Okay, then it's probably time we move to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That's 6 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Item 12, paper BCA 2248, Private Sector Housing Enforcement and Civil Penalties Policy. I'd like to invite the Cabinet Member for Housing to introduce this report. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This report relates to maintaining and improving housing standards in the private rented sector. The private rented sector contributes towards meeting housing needs in the district. Most landlords provide good standard accommodation for their tenants and manage their property satisfactorily, but this is not so in all cases. The report proposes a new enforcement policy for our private sector housing work. It outlines the current work of our housing standards team, which is responsible for ensuring that housing conditions are safe and healthy for residents, which is a statutory council duty. At its heart, the enforcement policy seeks to provide clarity for landlords and agents on what is expected from them and the response they can expect from the council to service requests. In most cases, this involves advice and encouragement to meet minimum legal standards. The policy also outlines guidelines for officers to ensure enforcement is taken consistently, fairly, and using good and fair practice. Wherever possible, we prefer to work with landlords in order to resolve problems to improve standards. Officers occasionally come across situations where housing conditions are extremely poor and vulnerable people are left at unacceptable risk to their safety and health. For example, poor fire safety precautions in houses in multiple occupation, inadequate heating and overcrowding. Sometimes officers encounter situations where they need to use formal powers. In the most extreme cases, officers work with other agencies, such as the police and the fire service, and have been actively dealing with dangerous and criminal activities relating to rented housing, such as modern-day slavery in our districts. The report proposes to charge for officer and administrative time to recover costs where formal action must be taken when it has to resort to using such powers. This policy is not intended to prescribe the action that will be taken in every situation. It will guide officers when investigating cases, serving notices or taking enforcement action, including legal proceedings. It is important that officers have the option to make use of all powers available to them. The government has given powers to local authorities to take stronger action where it is justified in the private rented sector. These are known as civil penalties and are an alternative to prosecution. They enable us to penalise the worst landlords through direct financial sanctions or prosecution and will only be used where there's a serious offence or where compliance cannot be achieved. The Council has developed its civil penalties approach, outlined in Appendix 2, after collaboration with colleagues in Suffolk and liaison with our legal department. This will ensure that penalties are proportionate to the offence and applied fairly. There is a system of receiving representations against the imposition of a fine and a legal appeal available in these cases. It is in line with the government's intention to prevent landlords from benefiting from unlawful behaviour. The Council intends to use these powers sparingly, only where justified, and generally where enforcement action has failed to obtain compliance. Any penalties received will be retained in the team's budget. Before recommending approval to those outlined in this report, I ask members to look at Appendix 5, which provides feedback from scrutiny, and the minutes which has been circulated as a hard copy at this meeting. Also, a thank you to Justin, David and his team for putting this policy together. There's a lot of hard work gone into this, and it's a very good policy, I feel. I therefore recommend members agree to recommendation to Cabinet Option 1 as stated at paragraphs 3.1 to 3.5. And this is to adopt the new private rented sector housing enforcement policy, including approving and authorising the use of the civil and financial penalty powers. It is also to agree a fair charging regime to recover the costs of housing enforcement action taken by the Council and to retain revenue arising from civil penalties. The reasons for agreeing the recommendations are to ensure that the Council has a consistent and effective policy to tackle poor conditions in private sector housing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. May I have a seconder, please? Councillor Busby. Any questions for Councillor Osborne? No. Councillor Hinton, do you have any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chairman, but just to say that the minutes that have been circulated clearly show that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee looked at this in some detail. There were some concerns about registers of private landlords and things like that, which obviously will be developed over time, and publicity regarding enforcement action that is taken against individuals. But I think they're all cover all the recommendations that Overview and Scrutiny adopted are well and truly covered within the recommendations before you today.
Thank you, Councillor Hinton. Moving back to the Cabinet, does anyone wish to say anything? Now we're into debate. Councillor Busby.
Yeah, I just kind of feel a bit nervous, I guess, about putting pressure on private landlords, and we've got such a big job ourselves to do with our own housing. It's a bit hypocritical, really, but we need to do it, but we need to sort our own house out as well.
Thank you, Councillor Busby. We do, and this isn't a way of sort of diverting attention or the focus away from what we need to do on our own, but there is a recognition that private housing is obviously with owner occupation, but also the private rented sector at 17% does represent a considerable part of the housing stock in the district, and we do need to make sure that private tenants have the homes that are available within that sector are fit and of good quality. But I think the important thing is that this is an enforcement policy and the ability to use civil penalties as an alternative to prosecution, and that's going to, I think, make it more effective that we can move forward with a way of ensuring better quality within that private rented sector. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I absolutely agree with your comment. It is important that we make sure the private sector are providing a good standard of housing. And you're right, at the same time, we need to make sure that we're doing the same job as well. And that's exactly what we're doing with this diagnostic work and the transformation plan that's in place. So the two will go working side by side so that when the work is in place, then we can be assured, all members can be assured, members of the public can be assured that not only is our own housing stock being looked at and being cared for to a high standard, but also the private sector is in exactly the same situation. So I don't think we're being hypocritical at all. I think we're forward thinking and making sure that both sectors are in a good position. Can I just add to that as well? I think you have alluded to it, Mr. Chairman. We mustn't forget that the private sector play a big role in providing housing to help us prevent homelessness. And we need to work with them. And part of this policy is to not work against them, to work with them and to support them to ensure that they're providing a high standard. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. That's point that's well put there, Councillor Osborne. It's a collaborative approach rather than anything else. Councillor McLaren.
Ask a question.
Yeah. Okay, go on.
It just crossed my mind about the resources and the skills required to take this on board. Do we, within our present resources, do we have enough skills and knowledge? Thank you.
Councillor Osborne.
We do. I will go for a more comprehensive answer to David, who's here to answer questions, but we wouldn't be putting a policy for approval if we didn't have the resources to follow it through.
David, can you expand on that, please?
Yes, we do have the resources to go ahead with this policy as it stands. We are a largely reactive service at the moment, but we do have the ability as well to deal with situations as they develop. And some of these referrals from the police and the fire authority, we have been working with them proactively.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Councillor Arthey.
Yeah, it's just following on really from what Councillor Busby said. And I'm always a believer in a carrot ahead of a stick. And this is the stick. But there's very little in here about what we can do to help. There is a section on advice, advice to the tenant and advice to the landlord, but it's advice to the landlord about his duties. It's not advice to the landlord about what we can actually offer to help. And one of those is that I think we recently agreed, well, we did recently agree to continue with our interest-free loans to landlords, and I think it would actually be useful. It depends who you think this policy is for, but I mean it would be useful if we had some sort of a commitment to actually offer advice to landlords about how we can actually help them with some of the improvements that may be found to be necessary.
Yeah, the loans were specifically for bringing empty homes back into use, but I don't know, Councillor Osborne, do you wish to comment in terms of what Councillor Arthey's just said?
Well, yeah, it does give details in the policy about the approach is going to be supportive rather than pushing them to do this and to do that. As the Chairman has alluded to, we do offer a loan of 20,000, but that is to bring empty homes back into occupation. It's not really in relation to making homes of a standard that they should be. I don't know if David wants to add any more to that.
Not really, Councillor Osborne. I think you've covered that quite well. The enforcement policy, I would say, there is a lot of content around collaboration, using the powers only as a last resort and working with landlords. And certainly, we don't take enforcement action lightly. We would always prefer, in most cases, to work with landlords, and we do offer them a lot of support. They do contact us. We do go out and see them and offer advice, and that's always our initial response to these cases. I mean, I think at the other end, where there is criminal activity, we just need this policy really along those kind of lines so that we can effectively tackle really serious problems when we need to. I mean, I'd give an example as well of we've done a lot of work on the energy performance certificates with landlords, with our colleagues in Suffolk, and that really has been about engaging with them, getting them on board and being proactive and giving them advice about how they can comply with those requirements. And I think one of the appendices specifically covers the energy performance work and is particularly light touch as well. So that should frame out what our kind of informal response is in that situation.
Thank you, David. And I think the important thing is that without this, then we would be entirely reliant upon prosecution, which would be obviously it's a heavier weapon in our arsenal, but is something we can't use as effectively or as often. So this is just something that will allow us to do things that we wouldn't be able to do if we were to rely purely on prosecution to enforce standards. Anyone else? Councillor Malvisi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think it's a sort of halfway house, because to rely on prosecutions it's a bottomless pit, or it can be. And in the last year or thereabouts, I've seen what happens when you go to the other end of the scale, like they've done in Scotland, where nobody is allowed to be evicted for non-payment of rent. So the end result is that you've got an awful lot of properties that are blocked. The owners can't get paid. They can't get rid of the alleged tenants, and it's having a huge detrimental impact on the entire housing stock of Scotland. So a heavy stick is one step too far, and the other one's just off the wall. So I find this a very good policy, and I'm supportive of it.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Arthey.
Well, yeah, can I just ask another question with regard to empty homes? Because you mentioned that our loans were only available for empty homes, and I think you said something like good point, but it doesn't apply here. But I think it does, doesn't it? Because somewhere in here it says what our policy principles are, and I think bringing empty homes back into use is part of trying to find it now, is part of it, isn't it? Thank you very much. Page 169, Councillor Hinton tells me. Yes, so the policy aims to ensure private sector housing is not left empty for an unreasonable amount of time or becomes an eyesore and nuisance to neighbouring homes. I would have thought this is exactly where bringing landlords' attention to interest-free loans might be appropriate. Have I got that wrong?
Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, if a landlord comes to us for advice and guidance and the property is shown to be empty, then of course we will advise them that that loan is available. If they come to us, if we find that they're in breach of the standards that you should be applying in respect of a property that's already occupied, then we can't offer them that loan. That is there for empty homes. But the advice and guidance will still be there, and I'm sure there may be other funds available that the team will signpost landlords to ensure that they can bring the house up to standard if it's through lack of resources.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. Any other comments? Right, then I think we can move to the vote on this.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. That is 6 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Item 13, paper BCA 2249, update on the social housing regulations and the outcome of the referral to the Regulator of Social Housing. I'd like to invite the Cabinet Member for Housing to introduce this report. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Central Government and the Regulator of Social Housing are in the process of introducing new regulatory requirements for all social landlords, including local authority landlords with more than 1,000 properties. The regulatory changes will also include updating and strengthening the powers of the Regulator and Housing Ombudsman Service, implementing a proactive consumer regulatory regime through formalising inspections and strengthening the current standards against which landlords are regulated and requiring them to be transparent about their performance and decision making. This enables tenants and the regulator to hold social landlords to account, put things right when they go wrong, and listen to tenants through effective engagement. This paper provides an update on our work around social housing regulation and compliance following our referral to the Regulator for social housing. To ensure we meet our obligations, we must have a governance structure. The Regulator expects members to have oversight of all compliance issues, and this includes gas inspections, electrical safety checks, fire safety, asbestos and Legionella lifts. I think I pronounced that right. In addition, following the tragic events in Rochdale, the Regulator has concluded that damp and mould must be reported via a governance structure as well. A structure where compliance is reported at Cabinet would give assurance that members have oversight. This forms part of the consumer standards and is critical. The consumer standards covers all aspects of housing. Therefore, as with the building services performance, the housing team will be reporting high-level key performance indicators. This paper sets out the suggested format. Following our self-referral and subsequent Regulator judgment, the Regulator said they would give us time to work on our compliance and contact us in a month. As such, we have not yet received correspondence from the Regulator. I would now like to propose approval to the recommendations 3.1 to 3.4 outlined in this report, and both myself and the Director of Housing will be happy to take any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. May I have a seconder, please? Councillor Malvisi. Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Arthey.
Yeah, it's the obvious question really, which is that we've got some figures in the report which I'm guessing are now out of date, and I'm guessing that somebody's turned up today to update us on the latest figures.
Councillor Osborne, do we have any update on the numbers here? They're probably about a week old, these ones.
I've got the figures that are provided to other Cabinet members. Bearing in mind this data changes from day to day, so it's very difficult to be able to provide up to the minute, if you like data. What I will say is that I did a quick calculation this morning on the data that we have got to hand, and 3 of those properties that are non-compliant, when I reported at full council on the compliance, 5% of our properties were non-compliant. Today, when I did that calculation, 3% of properties, of our total number of properties, are non-compliant. So that figure is going down all the time. It's gone down. Full council was only, was it last week we had full council? Yeah. So it's gone down by 2% in less than a week. And we need to bear in mind that also of that 3%, 99%, if not 100%, is due to access issues, which we are working on. I don't know if our Director of Housing has anything to add to that.
Thank you. So before Deborah picks up on that, so that 3%, that's only about 100 properties then out of our total stock, which is about 3,600, something like that. Yeah. Deborah.
Thank you. I'm happy to provide the latest overview of where we are with compliance with the minutes, if that's helpful. We do have an update. I do get an update from the compliance team every week, and I provide that to the portfolio holders every other week. So happy to provide that, the latest one, to go with the minutes.
Thank you. Thanks, Deborah. Councillor Arthey.
Well, so could we have the figures? Because in the report it was electrical testing 109, gas inspection 66, CO detectors 146, smoke detectors 1013, and I presume that has changed.
Deborah,
well,
can you...
Yes, it may have changed by tomorrow, but that doesn't mean that there's no point in having the figures.
No. Deborah, yeah.
Would you like me to read them out
Would
now?
you do so then,
Yeah,
please? Yeah, that'd be great if you got them. Thank you.
Okay, so gas, we currently have 59 overdue. Electrical testing, 105. Fire safety, so this is fire risk assessments. We've got 2 outstanding, and that relates to a couple of, it's front doors from some leaseholder flats, and we are taking some legal action with that because they're refusing to change them. Detector, so smoke detector, we've got 1,002, but I must emphasise that doesn't mean that we've got 1,002 properties with no smoke detectors. It means we are providing an additional smoke detector and replacing those that are, past their date. Water testing, so this is Legionella, and this tends to be in the sheltered housing stock. We've got 17 overdue. That's actually because of an IT failure, but they're booked in for the 23rd of March, so confident that they'll be completed then. And our CO detectors, our carbon monoxide detectors, we've now completed all those. So that's a very positive picture, but just so you can take some time to have a look at this in more detail, I'll still put it in the minutes if that's helpful.
But thank you very much, Deborah. Thank you.
So can I follow on from the question then? So as I understood it when the report was prepared, all of the outstanding gas and electrical inspections were where we had tried but failed to access the properties. So it now looks as though, whether it's because people have come back from holidays or cruises or wherever they've been, it now looks as though we're starting to get access to those properties. And so far, have we actually had to get any orders for entry or not?
So we've only recently started going down that road, so as of yet, we haven't been issued any injunctions. However, I expect we will, because you always get a small number of people who, for whatever reason, won't let us in. What we are doing is we're doing some parallel planning with those. So as well as going down the court route, our neighbourhood officers are door knocking, because often it's due to vulnerabilities and health issues, and that's why people don't want to let us in. So that's where we are at the moment.
Thank you, Deborah. Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, can I just add to that? We don't just stop at the 2 visits and then the injunction. We've got the neighbourhood team out there trying to knock on doors and trying to support people, because for whatever reason, mental health problems, and still some people, quite rightly so, they're after COVID, they don't want to let strange people into their homes, so that is still an issue as well. So we've got people that knock on doors and try and support those people to enable us to have access. So there's a lot of work going in to make sure that we can do all we can, because the injunction really, we don't like going down that route, but we have to be abiding by the law. So we're already doing the neighbourhood team visits as well.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Osborne, are we including tenant boards in this process?
The tenant board, have we gone to the tenant board, Deborah, with the compliance? I know we did with other things, but have we on the compliance?
So we haven't yet, because we haven't had a meeting, but as part of our governance structure, the tenant board will be getting regular updates, as will other groups. So as we start to develop more of our resident involvement, we'll be reaching out to more residents, and it might be, estate meetings, it might be sort of, door knocking, whatever it might be, but we'll have a variety of opportunities to be updating our residents.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Busby.
In 4.3, we talk about having routine inspections for all landlords with over 1,000 homes. Do they, once every 4 years, does that mean they inspect all 1,000 homes, or do they do a random sample? Or how's that work?
So that actually relates to an in-depth assessment which is provided, which is carried out by the Regulator of Social Housing, and that will be for all landlords which have got over 1,000 properties. So they don't inspect the properties, what they do is they come and inspect us, so it's like an Ofsted style inspection for those who provide housing.
Thank you. Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I can just go back on to Mary's point, if you go to 7.1 of the report, the future governance and monitoring arrangements does include a quarterly report to the tenant board.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Hinton, do you have any questions? All right, moving into debate. Does anyone wish to say anything in debate? So we're happy with the progress, not just the numbers here, but the update that Deborah has given. Sorry. Councillor Osborne, did you want?
Yeah, no, I was just going to come in if nobody else wanted to join in the debate to say we've actually, when this was first reported to members and to our tenants and to the members of public at large, and it was pretty widely spread out there, it wasn't done behind closed doors, that we've got on a long way in a very short period of time, and that's due to the excellent work of Deborah and her team. And I think we're in an okay situation now. It's not perfect, but we're in a much better situation than we were a few weeks ago. Give us a few more weeks and we'll be in an even better situation. So we're okay, and I think it's up to members to make sure that their residents, are kept informed and that their expectations are kept to a level that is right for where we are in this situation, and not cause them to get anxiety and anxious. They've got enough of that as it is without creating it anymore. So I think all members have a responsibility to do that. And I'm glad to see that where we got the future governance and monitoring arrangements, there'll be monthly updates to cabinet members on a briefing basis, and then will be reported, the cabinet then will be reported to on a quarterly basis. I think there might be a way where we can report to all members a little bit more frequently, excluding the cabinet members because they're going to get a monthly briefing anyway, as an exception. So if there's a situation where it's critical situation or it's not in a good place, then I think we have to report to all members by exception, rather than just the cabinet members on the briefing sessions. I don't know if the Director of Housing agrees with me on that one, but I think it will assure members that if we're getting into a position where things aren't looking too good, they will be informed that that is the situation.
She does agree, she nodded.
She's nodding. I can't see her, she's behind my back.
Thank you. Yes, we are thinking and considering how we can further keep members updated, because it's really important, actually part of the regulatory framework.
Yeah, thank you, Deborah. I was going to say, Councillor Osborne, the progress has been excellent, particularly now we're down to zero outstanding on asbestos, and as we've heard today, zero outstanding on the carbon monoxide detectors, which is excellent. And also, of course, I think the confidence is going to be high, given that we're now identified all the compliance areas, the KPIs, and the governance and monitoring arrangements, which I think are going to be very effective and will allow us to keep on top of this going forward. I'm sure that all of the other councils up and down the country are struggling to put in place similar arrangements, and eventually the Regulator of Social Housing, which has been set up to do a specific job, will be effective in ensuring that social housing stock everywhere is of the right standard, which I know we all want to see. Councillor Arthey.
Just to say full credit to Councillor Osborne as well on the way that she's dealt with it in her portfolio. It had the potential to cause unnecessary concern if people didn't, how can I put this, didn't quite understand exactly what happened with the self-referral to the regulator, and the issues around overdue inspections, as opposed to there actually being a problem with the property. It's the inspections that are overdue. And I've got to say that I thought that Councillor Osborne was incredibly helpful throughout the whole process, so compliments to her as well.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree. Councillor Osborne has used her knowledge and experience in the portfolio very effectively. Thank you.
And can you provide Clive with hourly updates on the figures?
Okay.
Thank you very much for the compliment, but I have to say it was a team effort.
Oh yeah, I know it's a team, and the team's been excellent as well. Right, if there are no further comments on this, we'll move to the vote, please.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. Councillor Osborne, may I take your vote? Thank you. That is 6 votes for, Chair. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Item 14, paper BCA 2250, Babergh and Mid-Suffolk Cultural Heritage and Visitor Economy Strategy. And as the Cabinet Member for Economic Growth, I will introduce this paper. This is our first dedicated strategy to provide a long-term vision to support the important cultural, heritage and visitor sectors of our economy, which are worth over £250 million per year to our 2 districts. A huge amount of work and engagement has gone into producing the strategy to ensure that it is robust, comprehensive and based on desk research, extensive engagement with cultural, tourism and heritage businesses and also wider industry partners, and to support the cross-party member and officer working groups. Section 11 of the report provides more detail about the stakeholder engagement and consultation. The aims of the strategy are to support residents in Babergh and Mid-Suffolk to live full cultural lives, building cultural confidence and civic pride, to create a sustainable, resilient cultural, heritage and visitor economy sector that champions the region's distinctive qualities, and to support the culture, heritage and visitor sectors to work collaboratively with neighbouring organisations, districts and counties to trial new approaches. A number of objectives have been identified for each of these aims, and these can be found in section B3 of the strategy. And also to deliver the aims, the strategy will be framed around 4 key themes. Firstly, building cultural habits to improve the everyday experience of residents and visitors. Secondly, accelerating progress through developing the sector and its resilience, and also accelerating progress through better use of data, insight and digital transformation. And finally, driving collaboration to evolve cultural, heritage places and destinations. And these themes are described in more detail in section 6 of the report. It should be noted that this is not our first engagement with our cultural organisations, and firm groundwork has already been achieved over the last few years through the Town Vision programme, which has contributed to the formation of cultural vision groups in Sudbury and Stonemarket. This strategy will provide a clear framework for these groups and others to work together to make sustainable and progressive changes both district-wide and at a local level. I think we can all agree that development of this strategy and the long-term vision are important so that we can support our many businesses in these sectors, enable them to ensure that residents and visitors alike can fully explore the great variety of attractions that our districts have to offer, and of course support the growth of the local economy. I'd like to ask for a seconder, please. Councillor Malvisi. Thank you. Members of the Cabinet, any questions? Councillor Busby.
Yeah, on the actual strategy report, this is a bit pathetic, I know, but what on earth is that a picture of on the first page? The animal. It looks like it's got 2 horns and no face.
It's a goat, isn't it?
Really?
It's a goat, yes. It's definitely a goat. Yeah.
Well, it's the greatest of all time, is it? Okay, I should have realised.
Any other questions? Councillor Hinton, do you have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, yes. This has exercised the parish council in my ward as much as me is, in that one of the things that is perhaps missing is an ability to generate a picture of what is available in the area rather than just individual little symbols all over the place. For instance, if you look at the the Star Valley all the way from Manningtree to Sudbury. There are 4 world-acclaimed artists who were resident in that area and painted in that area. They could be put together as a package to encourage people to come to the area and see where they painted. But then also, we could add on to that, if we didn't let the developers bulldoze them flat, but that's another story, aspects of the life that they were involved in when they were here. In Dedham, there are all sorts of places. I know it's over that iron curtain called the boundary between Essex and Suffolk, but there are 2 important painters who lived there. Constable and his family operated all the way around East Berkholt, and a brick kiln that was originally associated with them was dug up on or discovered, should I say, on a buildings development in the village. And before anything much was done with it, apart from a couple of photographs taken that went in the East Anglian, it was covered over again, allegedly on health and safety grounds. How on earth it could have been a risk when it was only about 3 foot deep and it had an iron fence all the way around it and it was at the far side of a field, I don't know. But that was another story. So we could put together more of a package of what is available within our district for people to look at, including, of course, better mention it as we've got a couple of separate people here, Gainsborough's house and Thomas Gainsborough and his painting. But he was just one of those 4. And we shouldn't ignore the others because they're equally well known across the world. And if all people have got to do is to look at it online, our tourism's dead.
Thank you, Councillor Hinton. Before I ask Zoe perhaps to comment, I think the idea of packages like that is something that we are aware of, not just for the artistic heritage, but other things like the vineyards, and there are other packages that can be put together, and these things have been discussed, but perhaps Zoe, you'd like to comment further?
Yeah, just to say that thank you for your comment. Under theme 3, there's a whole section around driving collaboration to evolve cultural heritage places and destinations. So there will be a large piece of work that will come out of this, shaping up itineraries for a place, what the offer is for visitors in that particular part of our district. And as you say, working across borders as well. So we're not looking at this as an isolated piece of work. We will be working with our partners across different district councils and organisations outside of our districts to kind of bring in that much wider offer that you said kind of draws up the whole of Mid-Suffolk Babergh going into North Essex and South Norfolk. So yeah, as we move into the action plan, you'll see there's a much larger piece of work to come on this, which is all around our itinerary offer.
Thank you. You have a further question, Councillor Hinton?
Just to come back and say, well, I've just noticed on page 28 of the report that it does talk about, where are we? No tour of Constable Country can ignore Christchurch Mansion. Hopefully, and it then goes on to talk about the fact that Alfred Munnings, despite the Munnings Art Gallery being located in Essex, despite it being located in Essex, it makes it sound as though Essex is some sort of purgatory that you should avoid at all costs.
Councillor Hinton,
I think that is good, but I think it needs to be pulled out into much more punchy bits and pieces. So this is rather hidden within the text of a very lengthy and detailed report. And if we can pull out some of those things into a more punchy way, then I think it would help us enormously.
Thank you for that. That's helpful. But I do think that there has to be an understanding that this is a Babergh Mid-Suffolk strategy, and we do recognise through the comments that you have made that we do need to involve, as Christchurch mentioned, which is in Ipswich Borough, and Munnings, which again is in Colchester Borough. So it's a recognition that they are outside of our boundaries, but we're not ignoring them, and we're not. And this is where the whole point between collaboration with other authorities comes in, because there's recognition that close by are these places which are of importance to what we're trying to achieve with our strategy here. We'll now move into debate. I've got Councillor Osborne, then Councillor Malvisi, and then Councillor McLaren. Oh, questions still? Oh, right, sorry, okay. Yeah. Well, Jan, did you have a question as well? Yeah, Osborne, Malvisi, McLaren, in that sequence.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just looking at the threats, and I was surprised to see that we haven't included in the threat that there's a lack of suitable and affordable hotels, accommodation. And I would have thought that was a big threat. There's somewhere, I'm not sure where I've seen it, but I know that I've seen that there's a real lack of hotels in Suffolk and Essex as well, but mainly in Suffolk. And I would have thought that was a real threat, because if we want to attract visitors, we've got nowhere to put them up. I know that's particularly a problem in Sudbury. Then obviously that's a threat, isn't it, to encouraging visitors into the area. So I would have thought that would have been identified as a threat, if not a threat, a weakness.
We have identified, as part of the work that the working group went through, we did talk about this, and I'm sure it was documented somewhere, but it's something that we did discuss, the lack of hotel accommodation. Fiona, can you clarify that one, please?
So I'm reliably informed by my colleagues to my left that it is in the full insights report. It just has been missed off the summary, which is in front of you.
Right.
What I would say is we're obviously aware of the I was going to say perception, but I think it's more than that. The growing calls for more accommodation, and that certainly has been discussed in some of the theme workshops. One of the actions that will come out of this is that we'll do a more in-depth piece of work to provide an evidence base for hotel need. So that is an action that we already know that we're going to be doing, and we'll be cracking on with that as soon as this gets approved, really.
Okay, thank you, Fiona. Thanks. Councillor Malvisi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've just found a spotlight on Creative Hub Colchester. Colchester, if I'm not mistaken, is in Essex, and unfortunately it does have a lot of hotels, so it can accommodate people, which we don't in Babergh or Mid Suffolk. The first thing that prompted me was I'm a firm believer in innocent until proven guilty, but unfortunately Mr. John Peel has had some claims, and I do think that to include any reference to any individual who's got a very dark cloud hanging over them is a bit scary. It's a bit worrying.
Okay, yeah, fair comment.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they are only claims, but until he is cleared, I think it sends a bad message out. And then I just wondered where's little Long Melford with its 2 Grade 1 listed buildings?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Councillor Malvisi. Councillor McLaren.
Thank you. When we did I'm very excited by this, I like all of this. When we did the member briefing, I did raise the subject of stories. In fact, when you look at all our heritage sites, a lot of them are stories about people. So we have Constable and Gainsborough. And I just wondered, I spoke to my parish councils about this, and I was wondering, how are we going to harness some of those areas, like Shotley Peninsula, that needs some stories about, there's quite a few famous people have lived on Shotley, and I was wondering, how are we going to harness that? Are we going to go out to parish councils or interested groups in areas and ask for contributions to this strategy? Thank you.
Thanks. Fiona, do you want to come back on it?
I think that's something we'll develop further as part of the action plan. So there'll be some specific actions that sit below this strategy. This strategy really provides a framework, and exactly what you've described sits under theme 3, which is around collaborating with not just partners across borders, but also local people, local communities. So absolutely, we'll see some of that coming out through distinct actions in the action plan.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to say? Councillor Arthey.
Well, just to say that I think Councillor Malvesi may have brought up quite an important point with regard to the John Peel Centre, which has a photo in here. It's a strategy that's designed to last for the next 5 years, I think, isn't it? And I did read over the weekend that Glastonbury, I think, have renamed the John Peel stage, and the BBC have renamed the John Peel wing.
Yep.
Because of all of the stories that are coming out now. You say innocent until proven guilty, but of course he died a few years ago, so I don't quite know how they're going to apportion any sort of guilt. But yeah, I think Councillor Malvesi has made a good point. It may be better to refer to an arts centre or something rather than actually have a picture of John Peel's name on the wall.
Okay, I think we've probably made the point on that one. Does anyone have anything else that they wish to say about the rest of the strategy and the information that it provides? There's a huge amount of work that's gone into it, as I mentioned earlier. The evidence base is excellent. We've got a really good online map of assets now. The SWOT analysis, leaving aside the issue of hotel accommodation, I think is thorough and very helpful to the strategy. And I'm very pleased with the overall piece of work. And I think that the fact that it's had so much input from so many parts, not just members, officers, but also external organisations and businesses in the sector, I think gives it a lot of strength and credibility. And the action plans coming out of it, I'm sure, are going to be very, very helpful. And Councillor Hinton, did you want to say something?
Sorry, yes, I was just going to say that a very important point was made about the Shotley Peninsula, of course, because the Ganges mast is currently being refurbished.
Yep.
So that's obviously something that can be added into it at the moment. It's not there at the moment, sort of thing, but it will be there within the period time frame for this. But every single part of our district has got various little stories which, if we go out to the parishes and ask them, we could end up with a nice little portfolio of ideas.
There's a massive amount. You're quite right, and I know we talked about the artists, and I mentioned the vineyards, but it goes across all sorts of things. You're right, the Ganges Mast. We've got the World War II heritage around Raiden and Lavenham airfields. There's so much that's and plus all of the food sector with Jimmy's Farm, the Suffolk Food Hall. So when I say a small, not so much a small district in population terms, a large district in geographical terms, there's a massive amount in Babergh. Okay, does anyone else wish to make any comment about this? In which case we'll move to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That vote is now in progress. That is 6 votes for. That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Well, thanks everyone. That brings us to the close of today's Cabinet meeting. The next meeting is scheduled for Monday the 12th of June at 2 p.m. I hope as many of us as possible are still here then, but we will have to wait to see what the electorate has to say about that. But in case we're not, I would like to thank members of the Cabinet for all of their work and their support. I know not all of you have been Cabinet members over the full past 4 years, but those that you have, it's been a long period, and those of you who are newish to the Cabinet, thank you for stepping in when I've asked you to, and for the support and work that you've put in. I know Councillor McLaren, for instance, has really quickly got on top of her portfolio, and I'm very pleased at that. And so it's been fairly enjoyable 4 years, I think. Oh gosh, we've got a special one coming up, haven't we? Yes, a special cabinet meeting on the 17th. So I'll thank you all again then. Yes, we've got our one-off one. Yes, I had forgotten that. Anyway, thanks everyone.